I took my first ride on the tube to get to the press conference this morning. I didn't really need to take the tube. The stadium is only about a 30-minute drive from our new house. But I wanted to get as close to the fan experience as I could, and I figured that was probably going to be my last chance to take public transportation before everyone in town started recognizing me. I opened my phone at Wimbledon Station and saw that I had a voice memo from Alistair Bennett. Must have gotten it while I was getting to the train.
Remember to tell them that we don't own Fulham. The fans do.
I knew what he meant, but I couldn't help but laugh to myself a little bit. If we didn't own Fulham Football Club, then what had we been doing the past few months? It also felt a little ironic hearing that from a man like Alistair, but in any case, I hadn't risked my entire professional reputation and called in every favor I had from all over the world to not own the club. Owning a Premier League club was a dream to me. Even more than that, it was an obsession. It was everything I wanted the VC world to be and just never was. Sure, I was good at that sort of thing, and it made me enough money and friends like Alistair to be able to pull all this together, but I'd never loved it. It had just gotten me where I wanted to go, not unlike the train I was sitting on.
Now, that's a proper club to support.
The voice came from an older woman a few seats over from me, who was smiling and pointing at the club crest on my jacket. I nodded and smiled back.
Mad business about the owners. Must have taken an awful lot of money to get them to bugger off like that.
Must have, I replied, remembering with great pain the exact amount it had taken to convince Shahid Khan to sell.
I imagine it'll be much of the same with this new lot. The only thing that changes with this club is the time.
You never know, I replied, fully aware of the irony. They might surprise you one way or another.
Let's hope you're right about that. For both of our sakes.
She smiled at me one last time and got off at her stop near Putney. I don't know why I didn't tell her who I was or what I was actually on that train to go and do. I doubt it really mattered much though. David Ingle and the Vanguard Investment Group were still relative unknowns, just names from articles and press releases. There weren't any expectations that had or hadn't been lived up to yet. We were just an idea. But as I stepped up to the microphone, that was all about to change. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is David Ingle, and I'm the new CEO and part of the ownership group here at Fulham. We are so glad and honored to be here, and just wanted to get up in front of you all and lay out our vision of what we want to do with the club over the next few.
Craven Cottage is not a tech startup. It is not, despite what yesterday's press conference might have you believe, a blank spreadsheet waiting for inputs. And yet, listening to Fulham's new American owner, you'd be forgiven for thinking he was launching an app rather than taking the reins of one of English football's oldest institutions. The worry isn't that he's incompetent, quite the opposite. The worry is that he sees Fulham not as a club, but as an opportunity. A sandbox, a test case. But football clubs, especially this one, aren't built in sand. They're built in memory, in heartache, in moments too raw to be modelled. He says he wants to emulate Brighton. Fair enough, they've punched well above their weight by marrying smart recruitment with a coherent footballing identity. But there's a difference between learning from success and trying to automate it. Time will tell, of course. Owners can grow into clubs, just as managers and players do. But for now, this American arrival feels less like a custodian of Fulham and more like a man trying to convert the soul of football into a spreadsheet.
Preseason officially started today at Motspur Park. I'd been to our training ground a couple of times to set up my new office and have a couple of meetings, but this was the first time that the players and the full staff were going to be there too. It felt like being a NASA engineer getting to test out one of their rockets for the first time. Sure, we'd spent plenty of time planning all this out and were pretty confident that it could work, but actually seeing the first version of it out on the launching pad, that's terrifying.
Just got off the phone with Bayern Munich. They're offering £40 million for Polinia, plus a couple million in add-ons.
Our new sporting director, Chris Merton, pulled me back into the here and now. Do you think that's fair, Chris?
Well, we value him closer to 50, but they know that he wants to go there. I don't think we're going to get much more out of them than that.
Just go with your gut. We can make 40 or 45 work if we need to. We've got a little bit of time, but we do need to sell someone, and it's probably got to be him or Jedi just for the sake of numbers. The reality of running a club like Fulham is that you don't always have the luxury of holding on to your best players. In fact, based on our analysis, the best thing to do is to sell them on when their value is at their highest. Teams like Brighton and Crystal Palace and Bournemouth do that all the time, and based on our models, that's one of the main reasons that they've stayed in the top flight for so long. And whether it's João Palhinha or Anthony Robinson that we end up getting rid of, we had 2 players close to peak value that could generate a lot of money for us and alleviate any potential issues with PSR in the process. I didn't particularly want either of them to leave, but reinvesting that money in a couple of new players whose value can grow is objectively the smart thing to do. But not everyone agrees with that idea.
Do we really want our first big move to be showing everyone that we're a selling club?
Alistair was back in his offices in central London and had called into our transfer meeting that morning. I don't think we have much of a choice, Ali. He wants to leave, and we need that money if we want to bring in some of these other guys.
I understand the logic, but I'm still quite reluctant to sell a player that we know is good for 2 or more that we don't. Even ignoring the optics of selling your best players to big clubs, I'm not sure this works out if we go through with it.
Understood. Thank you for your insight. It did not surprise me that Alistair was not sold on selling João Palhinha to Bayern Munich. He wasn't sold on bringing Chris in from Celtic either, or on letting go of Marco Silva so that we could hire Ewan Montgomery from SC Utrecht in the Netherlands. They were both too inexperienced, and a man like Alistair will always favor what he knows will work over what might work. It's what made him a successful businessman, and part of why I wanted him to be in this ownership group. Most of the others here are venture capital people like me, and in that world, risk-taking is just part of the deal. Alistair is supposed to be our grown-up in the room, and if for no other reason than that, I'm glad he's here as our chairman. His skepticism from that meeting has stuck with me, though. There have been a lot of questions about who we are and what we want to do with the club, and interactions like that and one I had at the press conference the other day have just made everything more confused.
Hi, David. Benji Holloway from The Athletic. You've put yourself in a very influential position in the running of this football club. What makes you think that a background in spreadsheets and Silicon Valley boardrooms qualifies you to do that?
That was the second question of the press conference. My first press conference. And it genuinely caught me off guard. How was I supposed to answer that? I think I just said something about how we're going to try and make Fulham supporters proud no matter where we're from. But he didn't look entirely satisfied with that. And I try not to think about stuff like that too much. But when someone like Alistair, who's supposed to be on our team in all this, asks something similar, I can't help it. Are we really trying to run the team the right way? Or are we just trying to be different for the sake of it? In any case, I'm not used to the decisions I make meaning so much to so many people. But I guess I'm going to have to get used to it. Because they do now.
Right, we're going to talk about Gareth Southgate in just a moment, but we do have some breaking news for you. It's quite significant breaking news as far as the Premier League and Fulham in particular are concerned, because Bayern Munich have signed the former Fulham midfielder João Palhinha. The Portugal international, who turned 29 on Tuesday, joins on a 4-year contract, which is valid through to 2020.
It's days like today when I wish we had been able to buy Liverpool or Arsenal or whoever else. It's not so much that they can go out and get whichever player they want, but they can afford to bring in players who don't have any obvious question marks. Chris and his team have been working tirelessly to put our list of targets together, but as good as we think some of these guys can be, none of them are the finished article. It could be that they're really young, or they've had a significant injury, or they don't play in the right league. Or in the case of the guy we just signed, people apparently just don't think they're good enough. Let me tell you about Gedson Fernandes. As soon as we started looking at our data, this guy's profile jumped right off the page. For Ewan's system, which is very high energy and requires a lot of running, we knew we needed someone who could be an absolute demon in the midfield. And that's Gedson. In our minds, this was an absolute no-brainer of a signing. So imagine my surprise when basically all of the response to us signing him, from both the media and the fans, was negative.
In an 18-month loan with Tottenham Hotspur, Fernandes only made 14 appearances and barely made an impact in those limited minutes. How does a failed loan spell get someone ready for the best league in the world? I guess we'll find out soon.
Benji is a good journalist, but even though everything he said was technically true, I feel like there's a lot of context that he left out. Getson was 21 when he got to Tottenham, and it was right in the middle of COVID. But very little of that kind of thing makes it into the stories. With most, if not all of the players we're signing, there's something about them that some people find disqualifying. But if we're going to bring in players that are good enough to compete in the top flight, that's the kind of chance that we're going to have to take. If they were good, without any qualifications, they'd be worth $50 million and going to Chelsea or Man United or wherever. That's not us. If it were up to Chris, we'd be signing all of his old Celtic players. If it were up to Alistair, we'd be spending all of our money on a player like Eze from Crystal Palace. He keeps reminding us that Eze has a release clause, but even if we did have the money to trigger it, we'd still have to convince the player to come here, which I'm not sure we could. And if it were up to me, well, it kind of is up to me. I'm usually the tie-breaking vote between Chris and Alistair, who almost never agree on what the plan should be. Alistair wanted to sign Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal. Chris liked the player, but thought that $30 million was too much for him. We ended up signing him. Chris wanted to sell Polina so we could reinvest the money. Alistair wanted to keep him. Polina plays for Bayern Munich now. And earlier today, we had what felt like our 100th transfer committee meeting to decide what we're going to do about Raul Jimenez.
He's on about £100,000 a week, and he's 33. I don't see how that makes sense for us right now.
It makes sense because he's the only player we've got who can put the ball in the net.
It's not like he's irreplaceable. He's got 16 league goals for us in 2 seasons. This is an opportunity for us to get younger and better, and I think we should take it.
I understand what you're saying, but I just can't make sense of getting rid of another of our most experienced players. What's the alternative if he leaves? David, anything to add?
There it was again. Down to me to make a decision. Alright, Chris, can you pull up the data on Balogun for us again? I get where a lot of these issues come from. Alistair has years of experience in football ownership, but he came from clubs that weren't in the Premier League. The idea that you might have enough money to bring in someone like Eze or keep someone like Raul Jimenez and choose not to just doesn't seem to compute for him. But I've got to do what's best for the club, and in this case, I agree with Chris. And regardless of what anyone says, the season starts in a couple of weeks. And that's what we've got to focus on right now. From my first interaction with Ewan in the summer, I've been struck by how calm he can stay under pressure. He just exudes confidence and ease in a way that made him feel like the right guy. It's probably also how he went and coached in the Netherlands with no experience in that country and did so well. But it was hard to know what to expect from the first match, if I'm honest. I felt nervous, of course, but watching the teams warm up made me realize that we are not done putting this squad together, and probably won't be for a while. But I'm learning that that's part of running a team at this level. Whether you're ready or not, the Premier League just keeps going on. All I really wanted to see tonight was some evidence that the plan is coming together, even if it was just a little. Alistair wouldn't like hearing me say this, but the result in the first game of the season was not the most important thing, especially away to Man United. And pretty early on, it became clear that that was the right approach, because this game did not make any sense at all. In his first Premier League match, Ewan went for a kind of complicated 3-4-3 formation, and Man United were routinely cutting right through it. I played soccer at Cornell, so despite what some people think, I do know the game pretty well, and I'd never seen any of Ewan's teams play like this. What was he thinking? Was he just nervous or something? Either way, this game was complete chaos, with both teams looking very open and taking turns to just sprint the length of the pitch towards the opposition goal with little to no resistance. But despite that, there was somehow still no score until the 11th minute.
Great chance here. It's in, and that's a debut goal, kicking off with his new club in just the right way.
Even in a game as absurd as this one, watching one of our boldest decisions from the summer score his first goal for the club was incredibly satisfying. Good for Flo, he's been working really hard. He deserves this. But that happiness lasted all of about 5 minutes.
Must be. And it's there to equalise. Settle in for the rest of this. A great game already.
And then came back again about 7 minutes after that.
And they take the lead. Well, off the bench and onto the score sheet.
Overall, it just looked like two teams still trying to figure out what they want to be. which is kind of exactly what was happening. I didn't expect it to end 3-3, because how could you? But all things considered, a point away to Man United in the opening game of the season is a just fine result. Or at least I thought it was.
2 goals up with 10 minutes to go, and we threw it away. How does that happen?
I thought we played pretty well, all things considered. Definitely a couple of things we can work on before the next match, but we'll get it cleaned up. Ewan knows what he's doing.
He needs to go back and have another look at this system he's got them playing. What's wrong with a 4-3-3? If it's good enough for Pep, it should be good enough for him.
I think he just needs a couple more players, Ali. We didn't have anyone who could keep up with Hoyland, so he just ran all over us.
David, getting him more players isn't suddenly going to turn us into Liverpool. We've spent plenty on players for him already. He's got to work with what he's got, and if that goes well, then we can talk about getting him some more players.
Alistair went on for a few more minutes about Ewan's tactics and how bad he thought we looked trying to play it out from the back. I think this is just his way of getting over his frustration, but the way my brain works, I have a hard time separating what's clearly just venting and what's a valid point. What if Ewan did need to change his system? Alistair wanted us to look at managers like Graham Potter or David Moyes or anyone else with Premier League experience, but Chris was adamant that Ewan was the guy, and he sold me on it. What if he was wrong? The drive back home had started off feeling pretty good, but the longer I stayed on the road, the more uncertain I got. Had I made a mistake? Maybe multiple mistakes? Was all this going to end in disaster? Maybe I should have just taken the tube instead.
Hello! Thank you so much for watching episode 1 of The Top Flight. It was so much fun to make, and I'm so glad that I got to share it with you guys. For those of you all that don't know me, I'm Will. I created this whole thing, and I also voiced David, who's kind of the narrator and the main character. There's going to be more where that came from starting next week, but if you don't want to wait that long, I have a solution for you. The Top Flight now has a Patreon page, which is where you can sign up to get a lot of bonus content and early access to episodes and episode scripts and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And whenever a creator talks about Patreon, I know it's going to get some eye rolls. So in order to kind of nip some of those in the bud, I want to go ahead and tell you what you'd be paying for if you do choose to support us. First of all, you'd just be helping us out financially because these episodes do take a lot of time and effort and love to try and make. But I'm also recording 20 to 30 minute long reaction videos to each one of these individual episodes where you get a little bit more insight on character development and sort of my thought process and creative process going into the episodes. You'll get access to episode scripts, which include stuff that doesn't actually make it to the final take. So there's information in those scripts and in those reaction videos that you would not be able to get from the actual episodes that I'll publish. I'll also be doing listener Q&As on there periodically, so if you have any questions that you want to throw in the comments on one of these videos, or you want to email to our address, which is listed somewhere on this page, you can do that. That's where that's also going to happen. So all that to say that the stuff that actually goes out on this channel on YouTube is just one piece of the puzzle. It's a pretty big piece, but if you want to have access to the rest of it, then I would highly encourage you to support us on Patreon. It's only $5, and if you don't feel like that's something that you can swing, all of the regular episodes will still be available on YouTube for free, so no worries there. I'd love to see at least a few of you guys over there, but even if you don't, we'll be back here at this same time next week for another episode. See ya.